Let's continue with our evolution key terms, study foldable. We'll continue in this fourth section here with our next word. And the next word we need to know for evolution is the term fitness. Now, we're used to seeing the word fitness used in an exercise sense, like, oh, that person is working on their fitness. They're trying to get better at, football, or they're trying to get better at volleyball, or better at gymnastics or swimming, whatever it happens to be the sport. Fitness is all about getting better at that sport. Well, fitness in evolution and in biology is a little bit different than that, but the concept's the same. So we can define fitness. Let me draw a line here. We can define fitness as an organism's ability to survive and reproduce in its environment. Now you'll notice we said survive and reproduce. That and is a really important word, because if an organism only survives but doesn't reproduce, it doesn't pass on whatever trait made it better to survive in the environment to its offspring. So survival is not enough. That organism has to reproduce and pass on that trait as well. So let's draw ourselves a doodle to help us remember this. I'm going to create two environments here. So over here on the left side, I'm going to have an environment that has lots and lots of blue leaves. And we're going to put two bugs in this environment. I'm going to put a bug that is pink in this environment. There's one bug. It kind of looks more like a spider, I guess. And I'm going to put a green bug. Right. So looking at my bugs here, we've got two bugs in a bluish colored environment. So which one of these bugs would be more fit for its environment? Well, the bug that's better able to hide and camouflage itself and prevent itself from getting eaten. So whichever bug is more likely to survive and reproduce. Since green is a little bit darker and the pink kind of sticks out more, I would probably say that this green bug is going to be fitter for this environment. If we had a blue bug as well in this environment, then it would be really simple to say this blue bug is probably the most fit for the environment, and pink is probably the least fit, and green is less fit than blue. So the most fit organism is the one that best survives. Let's look at another example. In this case, let's say that we have two kinds of birds. We've got bird one here, and bird one has an antibody for a virus. Bird two over here does not have that antibody. So if a virus of some sort comes in and attacks these birds, the bird that has the antibodies is going to be the more fit of the two because it's more likely that it will be able to survive the attack by the virus and then live to the point where it can reproduce and pass on this antibody trait. The bird without the antibody could also survive. Just because it doesn't have the antibody doesn't mean it's going to die, but it has less of a chance of surviving and reproducing than the bird with the antibody. All right, one more example and then we'll move on. In this case, we're going to look at another habitat. This habitat has rocks in it. And those rocks have little cracks in them. And these cracks are where a certain species of lizard lives. One of the lizards is pretty small. Another species or another version of this same species of lizard is actually rather large. So if the only cracks that were available for these lizards to live in and to hide from predators were this size, which of these two lizards would be more fit? If you said the tiny lizard would be more fit, you'd be correct because this tiny lizard can get inside these cracks and hide, and this big lizard would not be able to. So keep in mind that fitness isn't just about being the biggest or the strongest in biology. It's about having the right traits in a certain environment to be able to survive and then pass those genes on to your offspring. So sure, it could be like our blue bug in a blue environment, or it could be our bird with an antibody for a virus, or it could be a lizard that's small enough to fit in tiny cracks to be able to outrun and hide out from predators. All right, our next word that we're going to look at is the word variation. Variation. Variation is referring to different versions of a trait that an organism can have. Variation exists in nature. Lots of different organisms have different versions they come in. If we go back to our peppered moth example from earlier on the foldable, peppered moths have lots of variation. You can have peppered moths that are solid black. You can have peppered moths that are highly pigmented. So they have lots and lots of speckles that make them appear darker. You can have peppered moths that have a few spots that make them appear a little bit lighter, kind of a medium tone. And then you can have peppered moths that have very few, and they appear very light in color. That's one example of variation. Variation doesn't just exist in color, though. Variation also exists in other traits. For example, in humans, we have different blood types. So another variation would be in blood types in humans. Some people have A-type blood. Some people have B-type blood. And some people have O-type blood. A-type blood means you have certain projections on the outside of your blood cells that identify it as A. B has certain projections on the outside of blood cells that identify it as B. O does not have any projections. And some people actually inherit both types of projections. And so that would be A, B type. So variation just means that you have different versions of a trait in an organism, and variation is naturally occurring. Variation doesn't mean that, oh, the trees got darker, so suddenly a dark moth is born. That's not how it works. The dark moths exist in the population. This variation always exists. It's just that sometimes we have fewer with this trait, and other times we might have more organisms with this trait, depending on how fit they are for the environment. The next word we're going to talk about is selection. A lot of times you'll see this word paired with either natural or artificial to give us natural selection or to give us artificial selection. Let me get our line drawn here. There we go. Selection has a pretty long definition. So it is the preferential survival and reproduction. There it is again, survival and reproduction or elimination. Sorry about that, misspelled that, so that should be IN, elimination of individuals in a population by natural or artificial controlling factors. It's the preferential survival and reproduction or elimination of individuals in a population by natural or artificial controlling factors. So what does this mean? Well, preferential means that this is something that you like better than everything else. So like humans, you might say, oh, I prefer red Skittles to yellow Skittles. In nature, preferential is based on how fit an organism is for survival. The organisms that are more fit are preferred in that environment over animals or other organisms that are less fit. So I'm going to use dogs as an example of selection, and I'm going to give the example using artificial selection. So I'm going to draw some dogs here. So this is going to be generation 1 of my dogs. So if I have little dogs, and I have a couple of dogs, some of them have spots. Some are solid. And I could have more than just these 3, right? I could have, 10 or 11 little dogs here that come in these 2 variations. They either have spots or they're solid. Well, if I want to produce dogs with spots because I prefer spots to solid, then I could breed just this dog and this dog. This dog would be a great family pet, but I'm not going to let it breed. So that means that in generation 2, I'm going to produce more dogs with spots. And as long as I want dogs with spots, I'm going to keep breeding the spotted dogs. And I'm going to get more and more dogs with spots. If I do this enough, eventually, I may not have any more dogs that are solid. I may just only have dogs with spots because that helps them survive. If brown, though, is a naturally occurring variation, I may have a brown dog born. And once again, I just wouldn't allow it to breed. And so I would end up producing only dogs with spots. The same thing happens in nature. Go back to this example up here of our 3 little bugs. If the blue bug is better at surviving because it has better camouflage, then more blue bugs are going to survive, which means more blue bugs are going to reproduce. So more of the baby bugs will be blue. Does that mean that green and red don't reproduce because they don't survive? No, you'll have a few of each of these survive. It's just that the more fit individual is selected for by the environment, meaning predators prefer bugs that they can catch easier. So they're going to catch these bugs, eat them, and more of the blue bugs will survive. So that's what selection means. The last word we're going to talk about is life cycle. Life cycle. Life cycle is an important term in evolution because it helps us understand survival and reproduction. So in biology, life cycle is defined as an organism's life and we're typically looking at changes in that life or traits in that life. So an organism's life changes from birth to reproduction. Once an organism reproduces, they'll continue to live in most cases. However, at that point, they pass on their genes to their offspring, and the cycle starts over again for the next organism. And remember, in selection, we're looking for survival and reproduction. Once something reproduces and passes on its genes to the next generation, that's the important part for biology. So life cycle is from the time something is born to the time it reproduces. So we'll use a plant as an example. We have a little seed. We plant that seed and it grows into a little tiny baby plant, which then grows into a larger plant. And then if this plant makes flowers, we'd have a little flower show up. And a flower is the reproductive structure of a plant. So at this point, the plant reproduces when a bee pollinates this flower, and this flower produces new seeds, and the cycle starts again. This flower may not die, or this plant may not die, but at this point, its life cycle in biology terms is over because it has reproduced to form a new generation. So that's it for our 8 evolution key terms that are going on this vocabulary study foldable. The last thing we need to do is turn this into a study foldable. So to do that, we're going to cut from the open edge to the fold on the front of the foldable along each of the folds. So I'm going to cut here and here. Be careful not to cut off things that you've already cut. Sometimes they like to kind of fold under. Okay. So once you have cut all of your little vocab words apart, you now have a study foldable. You can sit here and quiz yourself by saying descent. What does descent mean? And then open up the foldable, check your answer. Same thing with modification and so on. The other thing you can do is you can fold all of your words backwards, like so. And then you can quiz yourself using just the definitions here, and then check and see, did you get the word right? You can also look at the pictures and see if you can interpret the picture and check and see if you got the word right. So you have lots of ways to use your evolution key terms study foldable to help you learn the words that you need to know to be fluent for Unit 8 evolution. If you have any questions, let me know, and thanks for watching.